humble waitress notices a blind child collapsing in the middle of the cafe. With delicacy and technique, she sings softly, calming the girl with only her voice. But everything falls apart when the father, a millionaire consumed by panic, publicly accuses her of abuse. What happens a minute later leaves everyone in silence, including him. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you are watching us from. We continue. I promise this is going to be the best story you will ever hear in your life. The afternoon rush at Magnolia Cafe in downtown Seattle brought with it the familiar symphony of chaos. Espresso machines hissed, ceramic cups clinked against saucers, and conversations overlapped in a cacophony that most customers had learned to tune out. But for some, this noise was not background music. It was a storm. Claire Whitman moved behind the counter with practiced efficiency, her auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her green apron spotted with coffee stains from the morning shift. She had worked at Magnolia Cafe for nearly 8 months now, ever since she had arrived in Seattle with nothing but a suitcase and a determination to disappear into the anonymity of a big city. The job was simple, the pay modest, and the questions from her co-workers blessedly few. That was exactly what she needed. She was wiping down the espresso machine when she noticed the little girl near the window booth. The child could not have been more than 6 years old, with dark curls framing a delicate face and eyes that stared forward without focus. She wore a soft pink dress and white sneakers, and her small hands were pressed flat against the table, fingers splayed wide as if trying to anchor herself to something solid. Claire recognized the signs immediately, the way the girl's breathing had become shallow and rapid, the slight rocking motion that had begun in her torso, the tension in her small shoulders. This was not a tantrum brewing. This was a sensory overload beginning to crest. The woman sitting beside the child, a stern-faced caregiver in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun, was scrolling through her phone with complete disinterest. She did not look up when the girl's rocking intensified. She did not notice when the child's hands began to tremble. Claire's chest tightened. She knew that feeling. The world becoming too much, too loud, too bright, too overwhelming. She knew what it was like to be trapped inside your own body while everything around you spun out of control. She set down her cleaning cloth and moved slowly toward the booth, her steps deliberate and quiet. As she approached, she could see the girl's lips moving soundlessly, her face beginning to contort with distress. The caregiver still had not looked up. Claire knelt down a few feet away from the table, careful not to invade the child's space. She did not reach out. She did not speak loudly. Instead, she began to hum, soft and low, a melody her grandmother had sung to her when she was small and the world felt too big. It was a simple tune, repetitive and soothing, with a rhythm like a heartbeat. The girl's rocking slowed, just slightly, her head tilted, as if trying to locate the source of the sound. Claire continued humming, letting the melody fill the space between them like a gentle thread. She noticed the caregiver glance up briefly, frown, then return to her phone. The woman clearly did not understand what was happening. The little girl's hands lifted from the table, fingers reaching out tentatively into the air. Claire understood. The child was blind. She was navigating a world without visual anchors, relying entirely on sound and touch and the few familiar textures she could find. And right now, in this loud, chaotic cafe, she had none of those. Claire reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small lavender sachet she kept there, a habit from her days studying child psychology before everything fell apart. She placed it gently on the table within the girl's reach, then resumed her humming. The child's fingers found the sachet. She brought it to her nose, inhaling deeply. Her breathing began to even out. The rocking stopped. Claire smiled, her heart aching with a bittersweet recognition. She knew this child, not personally, but she knew her struggle. She knew what it was like to be lost in the dark, searching for something, anything to hold on to. She continued to hum, and slowly, carefully, she began to sing the words. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but in the din of the cafe, it seemed to create a pocket of calm around the little girl. The child's face relaxed, her hands stopped trembling. She clutched the sachet and leaned back against the booth, her breathing deep and steady now. Claire stayed there, kneeling on the floor, singing softly until she was certain the crisis had passed. Then she reached into her pocket again and pulled out a small bracelet she had made weeks ago during a sleepless night. It was simple, woven from soft fabric, with a tiny musical charm that chimed gently when moved. She had made it for herself, a reminder of better days. But looking at this child, she knew it belonged here. She placed the bracelet on the table beside the sachet. The girl's fingers found it immediately, and her face lit up with the first smile Claire had seen. The child slipped the bracelet onto her wrist and shook it gently, listening to the soft chime with pure delight. That was when the door burst open. A man strode into the cafe with the kind of presence that made people instinctively step aside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an expensive charcoal suit that spoke of boardrooms and power lunches. His dark hair was streaked with grey at the temples, and his face was set in an expression of barely controlled panic. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on the booth where his daughter sat, and then he saw Claire, kneeling beside the table, close to his child. His face went white, then red. Before Claire could stand, before she could explain, he was across the room, his hand gripping her arm and pulling her roughly to her feet. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was a roar that silenced the entire cafe. Claire stumbled backward, her heart hammering. "I was just helping her. She was having a sensory episode and I—" "You were touching my daughter." He turned to the caregiver, who had finally put down her phone and was staring at the scene with wide eyes. "Mrs. Brennan, what happened here?" The caregiver, clearly flustered and defensive, stood quickly. "Mr. Donovan, I only looked away for a moment. This woman approached Lily without permission. I was about to intervene." Claire's mouth fell open. "That's not true. She was in distress and you were on your phone. You weren't even paying attention. How dare you?" The man, Mr. Donovan, hissed. His grip on her arm tightened. "How dare you come near my daughter? Do you have any idea what could have happened? She's vulnerable, she's blind, she's autistic, and you thought you had the right to just approach her." "I was helping her." Claire's voice broke. "She was going into a meltdown and I know how to—" "You know nothing." His voice was cold now, deadly quiet. "You're a coffee shop worker who overstepped every boundary. I want you away from my daughter." Now, the cafe manager, a nervous man named Tom, had appeared at Mr. Donovan's elbow. "Mr. Donovan, I'm so sorry. I'll handle this immediately." Claire felt the world tilting. This could not be happening. Not again. "She's fired," Mr. Donovan said flatly, not even looking at Tom. "And if I ever see her near my daughter again, I'll make sure she never works in this city." Tom nodded quickly, his face pale. "Claire, I'm going to need you to leave now." Claire looked at the little girl, Lily, who was clutching the bracelet and the sachet, her face turned toward the commotion with confusion and distress. She wanted to explain, wanted to tell this man that his daughter had been suffering and no one had cared, but the words died in her throat. She pulled her arm free from Mr. Donovan's grip, untied her apron with shaking hands, and walked out of the cafe into the grey Seattle afternoon. Behind her, she could hear the murmur of voices, the judgment of strangers who had witnessed her humiliation. She did not cry. Not yet. She had learned long ago that tears changed nothing. That evening, in her tiny studio apartment in the Fremont neighborhood, Claire sat on the edge of her second-hand couch and stared at the wall. The humiliation of the afternoon played on repeat in her mind. The anger in that man's eyes, the lies from the caregiver, the speed with which she had been discarded. It was happening again, just like before. She thought back to 3 years ago, when she had been a graduate student at Boston University, passionate and idealistic, studying child psychology with dreams of helping children like Lily. She had been doing her practicum at a private therapy center when she witnessed something that made her blood run cold. Dr. Vanessa Hartwell, the lead therapist and her supervisor, had been using compliance-based methods on a nonverbal autistic child, methods that Claire knew were not just outdated but harmful. When the child had resisted, Dr. Hartwell had restrained him, ignoring his distress, insisting it was for his own good. Claire had reported it. She had gone to the ethics board, armed with documentation and witness statements, and Dr. Hartwell had destroyed her for it. Within weeks, Claire found herself accused of falsifying records, of inappropriate conduct with clients, of academic dishonesty. The accusations were elaborate, supported by forged documents and testimony from colleagues who owed Dr. Hartwell favors. Claire had been expelled from the program, her name dragged through the mud, her future in psychology obliterated. She had tried to fight it. She had hired a lawyer she could not afford, had pleaded her case to anyone who would listen. But Dr. Hartwell was connected, respected, untouchable. And Claire was just a student with no resources and no proof. So she had run. She had left Boston, left her dreams, left everything behind, and started over in Seattle as a barista. Anonymous, invisible, safe, until today. She pulled her knees to her chest and finally let the tears come. She had tried to help that little girl. She had done exactly what she had been trained to do. What her instincts and her heart had told her was right, and once again, she had been punished for it. Across the city, in a sprawling mansion overlooking Puget Sound, Marcus Donovan stood in his daughter's bedroom and watched her sleep. Lily was curled beneath her weighted blanket, the bracelet still on her wrist, the lavender sachet tucked under her pillow. She had refused to let go of either item, had become agitated every time Mrs. Brennan tried to remove them. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion pulling at him. He had overreacted at the cafe. He knew that. But the fear that had gripped him when he saw a stranger so close to Lily, the memories of his wife's final words echoing in his mind, had made him irrational. His wife, Elizabeth, had been gone for 2 years now. The loss still felt fresh, a wound that refused to heal. She had been the one who understood Lily, who knew how to calm her, how to reach her. Since her passing, Marcus had been floundering, relying on therapists and caregivers and his own desperate attempts to be enough for his daughter. He had hired Dr. Vanessa Hartwell 6 months ago, on the recommendation of a colleague. She came with impeccable credentials, a polished demeanor, and promises that she could help Lily make progress. And she had been helpful, or so he thought. She had explained Lily's behaviors, had given him strategies, had been a steady presence in the chaos of his grief. When he had called Dr. Hartwell from the cafe, frantic and confused, she had been the one to tell him that strangers approaching Lily could be dangerous, that he needed to protect his daughter from people who did not understand her needs. Mrs. Brennan had backed her up, insisting that the barista had been intrusive and inappropriate. So he had acted. He had protected his daughter. That was what fathers did. But now, watching Lily sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks, clutching items given to her by the woman he had just destroyed, Marcus felt the first stirrings of doubt. He pushed the feeling away. Dr. Hartwell knew best. She was the expert. He had to trust her. Still, as he left Lily's room and walked down the long hallway to his own bedroom, he could not shake the image of the barista's face, the hurt in her eyes, the way she had said, "I was helping her." He told himself it did not matter. He had done what he had to do. But deep down, in a place he was not ready to acknowledge, he wondered if he had just made a terrible mistake. The days that followed were a blur of grey for Claire. She applied for jobs, avoided the downtown area, and tried to rebuild the fragile sense of safety she had constructed in Seattle. But the incident at Magnolia Cafe had shaken something loose inside her, a determination she thought she had buried in Boston. She was not going to stay silent this time. It was her friend Owen, the owner of a small independent bookstore called Chapter and Verse in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, who gave her the idea. Owen was in his early 60s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that had made him Claire's only real friend in Seattle. When she told him what had happened, he listened without judgment, then said quietly, "You have a voice. Claire, maybe it's time you used it." So she wrote, not a legal complaint, not an accusation, but a letter, a public letter about the failures in private therapeutic systems, about caregivers who did not see the children in their care, about the importance of understanding sensory needs and respecting neurodivergent children. She did not name Marcus Donovan or his daughter. She did not name Dr. Hartwell or Mrs. Brennan. She simply told the truth about what she had witnessed, what she knew, and what needed to change. Owen helped her submit it to a local online publication that focused on community issues. Within 2 days, it had been shared thousands of times. Parents of autistic children reached out to thank her. Educators and therapists commented with their own stories. The response was overwhelming. For the first time in 3 years, Claire felt like she mattered. But across the city, in the sterile therapy room of Dr. Vanessa Hartwell's private practice, Lily Donovan was struggling. The little girl sat in a chair that was too hard, in a room that was too bright, while Dr. Hartwell attempted to implement a behavioral protocol that Lily's body was rejecting. The therapist's voice was sharp, insistent, demanding compliance. Marcus watched through the one-way glass, his stomach churning. Lily was rocking violently, her hands pressed over her ears, her face twisted in distress. This was supposed to be helping her. Dr. Hartwell had assured him that structure and consistency were what Lily needed. But it did not look like help. It looked like torture. He turned away from the glass, his hands clenched into fists. He wanted to trust Dr. Hartwell. She was the expert. She had credentials, experience, a reputation. But watching his daughter suffer was breaking something inside him. That night, Lily spiked a fever. She refused to eat, refused to sleep, and clung to the bracelet from the barista with a desperation that frightened Marcus. In her delirium, she pressed the musical charm over and over, the soft chime filling the quiet house like a prayer. Marcus sat beside her bed, helpless and terrified. He had failed Elizabeth. He was failing Lily. He did not know what to do. It was Mrs. Brennan who suggested he read the article that had been circulating online. "Verse about children like Lily," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Some barista wrote it. People are talking about it." Marcus read it on his phone while Lily slept fitfully beside him, and with every word, his chest tightened. The descriptions of sensory overload, the explanations of how to approach a child in crisis, the gentle insistence that compliance was not the same as connection. It was everything he had seen that day at the cafe. Everything the barista had been trying to do. He looked at his daughter, clutching the bracelet, and felt the full weight of his mistake crash down on him. The next morning, he requested the security footage from Magnolia Cafe. The manager was reluctant, but Marcus Donovan was a man used to getting what he wanted. When the footage arrived, he watched it alone in his study, the door locked, his heart in his throat. What he saw destroyed him. The barista, Claire, had not touched Lily without permission. She had knelt at a respectful distance, had used her voice and presence to calm his daughter when Mrs. Brennan had been completely oblivious. She had given Lily tools to self-soothe, had stayed with her until the crisis passed. And then Marcus had stormed in, accused her, humiliated her, and ruined her life. He paused the video and stared at Claire's face. There was something familiar about her, something he could not place. He ran her name through a search engine, and what he found made his blood run cold. Claire Whitman, former graduate student at Boston University, expelled after reporting Dr. Vanessa Hartwell for unethical treatment of a child. Dr. Vanessa Hartwell, his daughter's therapist. Marcus sat back in his chair, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. Vanessa had known exactly who Claire was when he called her from the cafe. She had manipulated him, had used his fear and his grief to turn him against the one person who had actually helped his daughter. And he had believed her. He thought of Elizabeth's last words to him, whispered in the hospital room 2 years ago. "If you ever feel lost, Marcus, trust what Lily shows you. She sees the world differently, but she sees the truth." Lily had shown him. She had clung to Claire's gifts, had found peace in them when nothing else worked, and he had ignored it. He picked up his phone and made a call. 3 days later, Marcus Donovan held a press conference at his company's headquarters. The room was packed with journalists, therapists, parents, and advocates. Dr. Vanessa Hartwell sat in the front row, her expression carefully composed, confident that her reputation would protect her. Marcus stepped up to the podium, his face drawn but resolute. "I called this conference to address a serious matter involving my daughter's care and to correct a grave injustice I committed." He played the security footage from the cafe on the large screen behind him. The room fell silent as they watched Claire's gentle intervention, Mrs. Brennan's negligence, and Marcus's explosive reaction. When the video ended, Marcus spoke again, his voice thick with emotion. "I accused an innocent woman of harming my daughter when, in fact, she was the only person in that room who understood what my daughter needed. I humiliated her, cost her her job, and damaged her reputation based on lies told to me by people I trusted." Dr. Hartwell's face had gone pale. Marcus continued, "I have since learned that Claire Whitman is a trained child psychologist who was expelled from her graduate program 3 years ago after reporting unethical practices. The person she reported was Dr. Vanessa Hartwell, the therapist I hired to treat my daughter." The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Marcus raised his hand for silence. "I have reviewed Dr. Hartwell's methods with independent experts. They have confirmed that her approach is not only outdated but harmful. She has been removed from my daughter's care, and I will be cooperating fully with the state licensing board's investigation into her practice." Dr. Hartwell stood abruptly and tried to leave, but Owen, who had been standing quietly in the back of the room, stepped forward. "Before you go, Dr. Hartwell, I think everyone should see this." He held up his phone, and a recording played over the speakers. It was Mrs. Brennan's voice, recorded during a conversation with Owen where he had posed as a concerned parent. In it, she admitted to lying about Claire's actions, admitted that Dr. Hartwell had coached her on what to say, admitted that she had been on her phone and had not been watching Lily at all. The room exploded again. Dr. Hartwell was escorted out by security, her face a mask of fury and fear. Marcus found Claire 3 days later at Chapter and Verse. She was shelving books in the back corner, her movements careful and deliberate. When she saw him, she froze. "I'm not here to make excuses," Marcus said quietly. "I'm here to apologize. What I did to you was unforgivable. I let my fear and my grief turn me into someone I don't recognize. You helped my daughter when no one else would, and I punished you for it." Claire's eyes were guarded. "Your apology doesn't undo what happened." "I know." He handed her an envelope. "I've had your record at Boston University reviewed by an independent panel. They've recommended your full reinstatement and the expungement of all charges. I've also established a scholarship in your name for students studying neurodivergent child development." Claire stared at the envelope, her hands trembling. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's the right thing to do, and because my daughter needs you." Claire looked up sharply. "What?" "Lily hasn't been the same since that day. She's been in crisis, and nothing we do helps. She keeps asking for you, not in words, but in the way she holds that bracelet, the way she hums the melody you sang. She needs you, Claire, and I'm begging you to give us, a chance." Claire wanted to say no. She wanted to protect herself, to walk away from this man who had caused her so much pain. But then she thought of Lily, that sweet little girl lost in the dark, searching for an anchor. "I'll think about it," she said finally. 2 weeks later, Claire stood in the doorway of the Donovan mansion, her heart pounding. Marcus had given her space, had not pressured her, had simply left the door open. And when Owen had gently encouraged her to at least meet with Lily one more time, she had agreed. Lily was in the living room, sitting on the floor surrounded by textured fabrics and musical toys. When Claire entered, the little girl's head lifted, her unseeing eyes turning toward the sound of footsteps. Claire knelt down and began to hum the melody. Lily's face transformed. She scrambled across the floor, her hands reaching out, and when she found Claire, she wrapped her small arms around her neck and held on as if she would never let go. Claire's eyes filled with tears. She looked up at Marcus, who was watching from the doorway, his own eyes wet. "Okay," Claire whispered. "I'll help." Over the following months, Claire became a part of Lily's life. She taught Marcus how to create a sensory-friendly environment, how to communicate with his daughter through touch and sound, how to see the world through Lily's perspective. She set firm boundaries, and Marcus respected them, learning to listen, to trust, to let go of control. The house that had been cold and silent became warm and full of life. Marcus learned to play music for Lily, to read her stories with different voices, to let her explore textures and sounds at her own pace. And slowly, Lily began to thrive. Claire watched the transformation with a bitter-sweet ache. She had not expected to care for Marcus, but somewhere along the way she had. He was not the angry, broken man who had accused her in the cafe. He was a father learning to be present, a man rebuilding himself from the ground up, and he was falling in love with her. One evening, as they sat together watching Lily play with a set of chimes, Marcus turned to Claire. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly, "but I'm grateful every day that you gave us a chance." Claire smiled, her heart full. "We all deserve second chances, Marcus, even you." 6 months later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, Lily did something extraordinary. She was sitting at the table with Claire and Marcus, her fingers tracing patterns on a textured placemat, when she suddenly reached out and took Claire's hand. She placed it on top of Marcus's hand, then covered both with her own small palm. Then, in a soft, halting voice, she spoke her first full sentence. "My family." Claire's breath caught. Marcus's eyes filled with tears, and in that moment, surrounded by the people she loved, Claire realized that she had finally found her way home. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Marcus found Claire in the kitchen. He took her hand, his touch gentle and reverent. "I know I have no right to ask the own," he said, "but I'm going to anyway. Stay with us, not as Lily's therapist, as part of our family. I love you, Claire. I think I've loved you since the moment I realized what an idiot I'd been." Claire laughed, tears streaming down her face. "You were a pretty big idiot." "The biggest," he agreed. "So what do you say?" Claire looked at this man who had hurt her, who had learned from his mistakes, who had fought to make things right. She thought of Lily, the little girl who had brought them together, and she thought of the future they could build, imperfect and messy and real. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll stay." 3 months later, in a small ceremony in the garden overlooking Puget Sound, Claire and Marcus were married. Lily stood between them, wearing a flower crown and holding a small pillow with 2 rings. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Lily giggled and shook her head vigorously, making everyone laugh. Owen watched from the front row, his eyes misty with pride. He had lost the woman he quietly loved, but he had gained the knowledge that she was happy, that she was whole, that she had found the family she deserved. As Claire and Marcus exchanged vows, Lily reached up and took both their hands, linking them together. And in that moment, 3 broken people became one complete family, bound not by perfection, but by love, forgiveness, and the courage to begin again.